The development of Unilever's structure has been, as they call it themselves, a messy evolution of trial and error. Throughout the development of their structure, they have focused on two consistent practices to support all changes in their structure, linking decentralized units through a common corporate culture and the recruitment and training of high-quality managers. On the 1st of January 1930, Unilever had been officially established. It was a full merger operating as a single business entity. The Great Depression, which began not long after the company was formed, affected every aspect of Unilever's operations. Its raw material companies faced price decreases of 30 to 40% in the first year alone. As prices and profits around the world threatened to collapse, Unilever had to act quickly to build up an efficient system of control. The Special Committee was established in September 1930 to do that. Operating as a board of directors over the two boards the company had, the Special Committee was designed to balance Dutch and British interests and provide solid leadership for the organization. Furthermore, with the advent of World War II, exchange controls and frozen currencies make international trading increasingly complex. In Germany, Unilever is unable to move profits out of the country and has to invest lots of money instead. In the early 1940s, Unilever started to replace the Dutch and British executives from the head office who ran the local units by local managers. This helped Unilever in their process of fitting their products to the preference of the local consumers. In 1942, Unilever started with a management process which employees referred to as "ization", short for nationalization. They first started with their Indian subsidiary, and as the local executive and technical positions were filled with Indian managers, the Indianization of that subsidiary started, along with Australianization, Brazilianization, and other examples of localization of management in various countries in which Unilever operates. Because of the isolation of Unilever companies during the Second World War, an increasing number of competitors and their ization policy, the Unilever subsidiaries eventually became self-sufficient. Unilever recognized the danger of becoming too decentralized, and that is what led to having a bunch of scattered units without a common culture. This is why they set up a formal training program aimed at the Unileverization of all its managers. Throughout the 1950s, Unilever started to develop new managerial selection systems in Western Europe, and in developing countries they used advanced ways to recruit the best university graduates. Unilever, despite all their efforts, entered the 1960s with a very decentralized organization. The British and Dutch components coexisted only loosely with one another. There was also limited central direction, resulting in an excessive number of brands and factories, and a virtually autonomous business in the United States. Although Unilever had a strong senior management, the ongoing decentralization had created in some respects one of the world's least cohesive large businesses. Everything revolved around the tension between maintaining the benefits of local market knowledge and decision making and containing the disadvantages of excessive decentralization and fragmentation. Strong networks and shared values kept Unilever together, but in 1966 Unilever drastically had to reorganize the responsibilities for all products in its main European countries. Until this reorganization, the national managements were responsible for profits of all units in its territory. The managers of the product groups only gave advice, and their ability to affect the way in which products were marketed or distributed mainly depended on the local manager's attitude. Unilever reversed this, and the managers of the product groups now became responsible for the profits, and the national managements now had an advisory role. The switch may sound simple, but it took years before the last remnants of the old structure had disappeared. By the 1970s, times had changed. Unilever found itself burdened, especially in Europe, with a high cost structure and the task of managing businesses far removed from the manufacturing and branding of their packaged consumer goods. In 1973, the consequences of too much decentralization in the past once again became evident when an oil crisis transformed Unilever's home market from a fast-growing economy into one afflicted by inflation and recession. The local markets had also caused duplication of manufacturing, meaning that different local manufacturers were producing the same goods, which in turn drove up the cost as well.
Desperately needs is change.
By the late 1980s, after continuous problems, it was clear that Unilever's organizational structure once again had to be reconsidered. This time, Unilever's top management tried to combine a decentralized structure, as this provided a deep understanding of local markets, with a degree of centralized control. The first step in this reorganization was to create unity by forming a committee of 3 board directors. These 3 directors were responsible for all Unilever's food interests, and they no longer had specific responsibilities for a group of products. They worked together as an executive trio, each one being responsible for the profits in a group of countries. The reason for picking 3 directors is that one director wouldn't have been able to have a worldwide responsibility, as the span of control would have simply been too broad. Having one director would have also led to a second or maybe a third layer of management. By creating a group of 3 directors, Unilever kept a flat organizational structure, something they highly value. By letting these 3 work together as one group on their product strategy, they achieved the unity they had been previously missing. This reorganization led to a strengthened position in both product and geographic terms. In product terms, because the new strategic groups corresponded more with the consumer needs, and in geographic terms because they continued to rely on knowledge of their operating companies to decide what product expertise to use in their local markets. At the beginning of the 21st century, Unilever announced a new 5 billion 5-year growth strategy. By letting 25,000 employees go, which was 10% of the total employee base, they initiated a shrinking to growth strategy. Unilever was split into 2 separate global units, Foods and Home and Personal Care, headed by 2 separate executive directors. They reorganized its 300 operating companies into 10 regional groups. In order to make this strategy successful, Unilever chose restructuring as a tool. They decentralized their control over its subsidiaries once more. More than half of its top executives were replaced with young blood. Their portfolio of brands got cut down from 600 to 400 to focus more on leading brands. In 2004, Unilever discarded 90% of their brands, which meant going from 400 to just 40 mega brands. The 40 brands left all exceed sales over $1 billion. Unilever also appointed their very first non-executive director. Unilever's story is one example of how a single company has come to manage far-flung units that share a common culture. Unilever's structure has constantly been changed and has been developed through trial and error, and not by the application of theory. In order to maintain a flexible organization with dedicated managers, Unilever constantly reassesses the balance between their centralized and decentralized activities. The relations between Unilever's head offices, regional groups and national operating companies are monitored on an ongoing basis.
Tutski. No, thank you, though. Key to success in this racket is this little baby right here. It's called cocaine. Right. It will keep you sharp between the ears. It'll also